It was Minneapolis, 1999. Obesity was only an emerging problem back then when the heads of America's biggest food companies arrived for a rare meeting. Among them, the heads of Kraft, Nabisco, Nestle, Coca-Cola, and General Mills.
These are executives who normally are fighting each other for space on the grocery store. They don't get together very often, but in '99, they got together to talk about obesity.
Reporter and author Michael Moss. He described the Minneapolis meeting in his best-selling book.
And they had been pulled together by a cabal of insiders within the industry who had increasingly become concerned about both the industry's responsibility for and culpability for being blamed for obesity.
They gathered at the Pillsbury Company headquarters, 31st floor. The message they got was uncompromising. And it was delivered by two of their own. Michael Mudd, a top executive at Kraft, and Jim Hill, a leading nutrition researcher. In a slide presentation obtained by the Fifth Estate, the two men gave it to the bosses straight.
A national epidemic.
There were too many warnings, Mudd told them, before drawing a parallel designed to make them uncomfortable. Tobacco companies had recently settled a massive lawsuit in face of evidence their product caused disease. Did the food industry, he asked, want to be next?
If anyone in the food industry ever doubted there was a slippery slope out there, I imagine they're beginning to experience a distinct sliding sensation right about now.
Graphics drove home the point. Maps showing obesity rates rising and spreading across the country like a rash.
What are the health implications of all this? Studies show that obese individuals are at a higher risk of developing chronic diseases such as diabetes, heart disease, hypertension, and cancer.
Topping the list of contributing factors, the ubiquity of inexpensive, good-tasting, supersized, energy-dense foods. In other words, the very foods the CEOs were in charge of selling. The two men were hoping for money to study the link between food and obesity. Instead, they got a tongue lashing, starting with Stephen Sanger, the head of General Mills.
He was rather furious at Mudd for bringing this to them and blaming them for this. And his defense was, look, we already offer consumers a choice. If they want low-fat this or low-sugar that, we have those products in the grocery store. We feel we're already being responsible both to consumers from a health perspective, but also to Wall Street.
So let's start at the beginning. What do we mean when we say sugar? Well, whether it's the white stuff that you bake with or the brown stuff that you sprinkle on your oatmeal, whether it's honey, molasses, syrup, maybe the high fructose corn syrup you've heard of, there's a lot of that in things like pop. Chemically, it's all pretty much the same thing, and we do consume a lot. On average, in this country, 26 teaspoons of sugar per person per day. That's 40 kilos a year, the equivalent of 20 bags. It's what sweetens the products and spikes the profits of some of the most powerful and familiar companies in the world. The food industry is one of the biggest manufacturers in North America, nearly $1 trillion in sales every year. And it couldn't do it without sugar.
Sugar is one of the essential basic ingredients used in 99% of the processed foods out there.
Former industry executive Bruce Bradley has worked for some of North America's biggest food companies.
It's something that can drive a lot of taste in the products and a lot of appeal for consumers. So it's one of the basic building blocks.
And make no mistake, the amount of sugar in our food is no accident. The food industry goes to great lengths to figure out what makes us crave a product, the exact combination of ingredients it calls the bliss point.
You know, everybody asks, what is the bliss point?
Dr. Howard Moskowitz. He's a longtime food industry consultant known as Dr. Bliss.
The best way I can do it is to give you an example. Do you drink coffee with sugar or with milk?
With milk?
So if you add more and more milk, you like it more and more, up to a certain point where you like it the most. And then add a little bit more milk and you say, oh, it's too milky, and my gosh. And add a lot more milk and it's horrid. So it's Goldilocks. It's the middle, it's the best one. It's the level where you like that product the most.
A Harvard-trained mathematician, Moskowitz uses models to test people's reactions to different versions of a product. Once he's found the bliss point, the product hits the shelves. From soda pop to spaghetti sauce, his magic makes money.
Everybody wants to sell just a bit more. How do you get that immediate increase in acceptance? Those in the know realize you can add a little sugar.
A little. The first thing to know is that 4 grams of sugar is 1 teaspoon. So with that in mind, let's look at some products. It's no surprise Coca-Cola has a lot of sugar. 40 grams a can, that's 10 teaspoons. But much of the sugar we eat is hidden in foods we don't necessarily think of as sweet. This oatmeal, 3 3/4 teaspoons of sugar a bowl. This vanilla-flavored yogurt, nearly 5 teaspoons in just half a cup. You can find sugar added to bread, soup, all kinds of condiments, hot dogs. This chicken dinner, labeled healthy choice, has 5.5 teaspoons of sugar in every serving. Is this the result? There's no question, as our consumption of sugars has grown, so have our bodies. Canada doesn't keep good statistics, so we've used American ones. And those stats raise the troubling question, are we changing our evolutionary shape? Here's the line showing our sugar consumption for the last 50 years. Here's the number of people who've become overweight and obese. Now, look at this line. It's for cases of type 2 diabetes. And this one, diseases of the heart. Back in the 80s and 90s, we used to blame a lot of those problems on dietary fat. But then we started taking fat out of our foods. Did the incidence of disease go down? No. So that got a lot of doctors and nutritionists asking why. The answer, according to an increasingly vocal group, is sugar.
Which was worse, the sugar or the fat? The sugar 1,000 times over.
Robert Lustig, doctor, author, medical professor, and one of the leaders of the anti-sugar campaign.
The fact is, our food supply has been altered and adulterated under our very noses and in plain sight over the past 30 years.
In addition to treating obese kids, Lustig is a YouTube sensation. His lecture on sugar has been seen by nearly 4 million people around the world, and he doesn't pull his punches.
The fat's going down, the sugar's going up, and we're all getting sick.
You use words. You use poison. You use toxic.
Certainly I use those words, and I mean them. This is not hyperbole. This is the real deal. Everyone thinks that the bad effects of sugar are because sugar has empty calories. What I'm saying is, no, actually, there are lots of things that do have empty calories that are not necessarily poisons.
Poisonous, he says, because of what too much sugar does in our body. So let's take a look at that. Sugar is made up of 2 molecules, one called glucose, here in blue, the other fructose, in red. When they separate in our gut, the glucose circulates throughout our body, feeding our muscles and our brain. But the fructose goes right to our liver, and it's in the liver where all kinds of problems begin.
When you metabolize fructose in excess, your liver has no choice but to turn that energy into liver fat. And that liver fat then causes all of the downstream metabolic diseases.
We'll tell you more about those diseases in a moment. But first, let's talk about your brain. Too much fructose, says Lustig, shuts down the part of your brain that tells you when you're full.
it doesn't get registered by the brain as you're having eaten. So if you take a kid and prep them with a soft drink and then let him loose at the fast food restaurant, does he eat less or does he eat more? Turns out he eats more.
The reckoning, warns Dr. Lustig, is coming.
The bottom line, there will be no money left by the year 2026 for anything else because diabetes will have chewed through all of the healthcare dollars. There will be no healthcare in 13 years here in America if we do nothing, and I'm sure Canada is right behind.